and Jack's going to lead the meeting.
Oh,
We
okay.
match.
So,
I have a
Huh?
sweater on. I have a sweater on like your shirt.
Oh,
See?
I couldn't see very well from my screen, but
You can stand up, Susan.
Oh, I was. No.
Oh, there.
all right, let's go get,
You still have one like it, should I?
let's go ahead and get started. Jack Walsh, I've been asked to chair the meeting today, so I'm calling the meeting to order. And we are, the committee members, myself and Jack Doby is online, and Han Tran is online as well. We're joined here in person by Deputy Mayor Honda and Council President Kochmar, and Council Member Lydia Sefa-Dawson is online as well. And so we'll begin with item A, approval of minutes of the December 5, 2022 meeting.
I have a question on those.
Yes.
Some of the, on the minutes, it says insert name here, presented the citywide pedestrian safety, insert name here, presented the blah, blah, blah. So those names need to be inserted?
So where, well, what items is that on?
It's in the minutes.
Yeah, but in the minutes, what item in the minutes?
It is item E, item F, item G, I thought there was one more, but those are the ones that I can find right now.
All right. So perhaps we can have a motion to approve the minutes with the, provided those names are inserted? All right.
I move adoption after the insertion of the names that are missing from the minutes.
All right, it's, motion's
I'll
been
second
made.
that.
Second, all right. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the minutes after the names have been inserted. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
I
That is unanimous. All right, on to item B, acceptance of transportation grants. And I understand Rick Perez is ready for that.
Except that host disabled participant screen sharing. So, not quite sure what to do about that. Anybody from IT? Is anybody in there?
Rick, try it again.
Okay. Ah, there we go. All right. Can everybody see that?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Maybe if we can take the other pictures off of the shared screen?
Yeah, here.
All right.
I'll move that down. And I'm gonna move that down here so I can see what I'm doing. And slideshow, there we go. Aha, finally. All right, good evening. And yes, tonight is about accepting transportation grant funding. We had applied for Transportation Improvement Board's new active transportation program. It was kind of interesting because we didn't really know what kind of projects they were really after, but we decided to submit for our two highest ranking rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and we did get the award of $353,000 for a total, actually, check my math, never trust an engineer to do math, $503,000 estimated project cost. So with that, our options are, one, to recommend forwarding the proposed acceptance of the grant to the January 17th council consent agenda for approval, or do not approve acceptance of the grant and provide direction to staff. The mayor recommends option 1. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Do we have any questions?
Have we budgeted the 153,000?
So, yes, so basically, we've had this ongoing program to do the rectangular rapid flashing beacons that's funded from the half-cent gas tax that we started getting additionally back in 2003, I think it was. So we would be applying that funding to provide the match.
No.
Thank you.
All right. Will this help, had we already had other things budgeted for that? So, I mean, will this help?
Yeah, so
have some-
basically, we have a project right now that is in design and planning to bid this spring for 8 other locations to provide improved pedestrian access, particularly around transit stops is where most of the project locations are, and also areas where we have some collision history. So the 2 that we're proposing is on First Way South on the north side of 340th Street, and secondly on Weyerhaeuser Way in front of World Vision. So, so that takes care of most of the higher ranking RFB projects in the city. I think there's like 2 or 3 more that probably justify funding at some point in the future. But for now, we've made it pretty far down the list, and this will bring us up to 46 locations in the city.
Okay. So they're on Weyerhaeuser Way South. There's a bus stop right there across
Yes.
from World Vision. Okay.
Yes, for Pierce Transit Route 501.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
It's Coach Moore. It's okay. You put on a while. It's okay.
Council President Kochmar, yes.
So Rick, the money is coming from the state of Washington Transportation Improvement Board?
That's correct.
Okay. So do we ever get federal money for any of these projects, or is it all state?
So thus far, we've gotten, actually, the 8 that are already in design, that is federal safety money that we got for that.
Okay.
So, yeah, we've looked at all sources we can for these types of projects.
So does this come through the Puget Sound Regional Council that these get awarded?
No, actually, this federal safety money comes directly from WashDOT.
But the other money from the
The
state?
TIB has, the PSRC has nothing to do with the
Separate.
TIB. That's,
Okay.
PSRC only distributes federal funds. And
TIB, was that?
TIB is state funds.
And that was the organization that Steve Gorster was in charge of?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Right.
Just trying to keep everybody straight. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? I'm not seeing whether.
I do have,
Yes,
right.
Lydia.
Yeah, my question is actually not necessarily about this grant, but Rick, you're the right person to ask. Near my neighborhood, 21st and 353rd-ish, but on 21st, I've noticed that people get to make a turn, they get in a lane where they think it's the median, what is it called, the center lane where people can change, where you can wait.
Yes.
And I think that's where accidents keep happening and where people have even, there has been fatality there. Are you guys looking at that area at all?
There is a project on the capital improvement program to widen that section of 21st to 5 lanes. It is not currently ranking very well, but that is something that I hope either eventually we'll get to the point where enough development has occurred that a lot of the frontage improvements will be providing that, and then we'll have a much smaller gap project to make it a continuous improvement.
Okay, I see it happen a lot. So just concerned about people who don't know that area make that mistake a lot. So I would like, yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
All right.
Jack,
Yes, go ahead, Jack.
I'd like to move that we accept the money and move it to the next council meeting to approve as the mayor's recommendation number 1.
All right, to the consent agenda?
Second that.
Consent agenda, yes.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to move it to the consent agenda, the next council meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous, and it's going to the consent agenda. Next, item C, Ordinance Mobile Food and Retail Vendors Code. Before that, one thing we failed to do is ask if there's any public comment at the beginning of the meeting. Is there any public comment?
There was no public comment
Okay.
turned in.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Committee Chair Dovey, Council Members Tran and Walsh, Council President Kochmar, and Deputy Mayor Honda, as well as Councilmember Asefa Dawson, who I think I saw on Zoom, and any other council members on Zoom who I didn't capture. I'm Associate Planner Evan Lewis, and this agenda item is a proposed mobile food or retail vendors code amendment. And the question before council is whether the city should adopt a new chapter of our Title 19 zoning code regulating mobile food and retail vendors in the city. The purpose is to establish more clear, consistent, and flexible mobile vending review processes and standards. The code amendment arose from challenges that we faced in the Community Development Department, regulating food trucks and fielding inquiries from food truck operators who want to operate even for a fairly short period of time. And here's a brief rundown of those three of those main challenges. The first challenge involves the level of review. The level of review process for food trucks, mobile food vendors, is out of scale with how most food trucks operate. And I'll be very specific here. Right now in the city's food trucks, they're currently regulated under the temporary use code. It's a very brief section of our temporary use code. And food trucks that operate up to 4 hours a day can operate with nothing more than a business license, which is a pretty low bar to meet for operating in the city. Once they go over that 4 hours, they can operate up to 7 days in a residential zone and 45 days in a non-residential zone with a temporary use permit. Temporary use permits require up to 30 days, at least 30 days notice before a food truck wants to start operating. Over those thresholds, so operation over 7 days in a residential zone, over 45 days in a non-residential zone, triggers the same use process as any brick and mortar providing that same service, any brick and mortar restaurant, fast food restaurant, coffee shop, et cetera. And that's a fairly intensive process that can take many, many months. So there's a very steep gradient between hardly any review at all to a level of review for food trucks and other mobile vendors that's quite dramatically out of scale with the way that most food trucks operate. This brings up the next challenge, which is that food trucks in the city are subject to the same very general review requirements as all other temporary uses. And this is difficult. Food trucks are unique. They're mobile. They can bounce around from site to site. Those sites can be private property, public and private right-of-ways. You find a wide range of creative food truck designs, orientation to access ways. Some are fully self-contained, some have seating, umbrellas, even music and things like that. So the variety and mobile nature of food trucks makes them different from other uses. They have unique impacts, and thus they need to have code requirements that address those unique impacts. And lastly, our code doesn't define food trucks or mobile vendors. And this is This is a pretty basic thing that we have for most uses in our zoning code. There's an associated definition. Without a definition, it's more difficult for staff and applicants also to determine which code applies. So just to recap these three challenges, kind of working from bottom to top, the proposed code updates establish a definition for mobile food or retail vendor. They establish review criteria that are unique to food trucks and the way they operate and the impacts that they have. And it also establishes review processes that are more properly scaled the way that food trucks operate. And that last one is really probably the core of these code updates. When you look at the code, it can seem more complicated than it actually is. So this little table kind of tells that story as far as which review process is required based on where and how long a food truck operates at a certain location. So a food truck that operates either 1 day in any zone in the city or up to 180 days in any zone in the city, except for properties that are zoned single family with single family uses. All they need is a business license and what will become essentially a supplemental checklist, a self-attestation checklist that will require food truck operators to fill out one time only when they come in prior to their business license being approved. Once they've gone through that initial basic level of review, they're essentially good to go up to that 180 days. And that first category accommodates probably most food trucks in the city. But beyond that, if a food truck wants to operate permanently on a site that's accessory to an established use, so most frequently we see this at gas stations, food truck next to a gas station or a strip mall or something like that, that would require a new mobile vendor permit that this code establishes. This is more similar to our temporary use permit right now. It would probably take a couple weeks to process, and that permit would be required prior to issuing the business license. And that's appropriate given that you're essentially permanently changing the character of a site, but it's also accessory to an established use that already exists. And then lastly, if a food truck wanted to come in and operate permanently as the principal use on a property, there would be a required site plan review process subject to our use process 1, which is the least intensive of our zoning use processes. But that's appropriate when you are the principal use permanently on a property, even if you are operating as a mobile vendor. So this code update, it does not supersede, circumvent, or conflict with regulations from other agencies. So the Washington State Department of Labor and Industries has its own set of requirements for mobile vendors. The licensing process through the Department of Revenue. Seattle King County Public Health has its own standards for food trucks. And I think also commissary kitchens, where a lot of them prepare their goods and services. And also South King Fire and Rescue has its own checklist and review process for food trucks. So all of that still applies. And lastly, it does not change existing requirements for food trucks that operate in public right-of-ways or at special events. So if a food truck wants to operate in a public right-of-way, per our code, that would still require a right-of-way permit, and at special events, a special events permit. So it doesn't change either of those existing processes. And so that leaves us with the mayor's recommendation, which is to adopt the proposed ordinance. So happy to answer any questions.
Right, thank you. I'd say it's a long overdue change in ordinance. Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. When I read through this, did I read it right that a food truck can operate in a neighborhood in front of a residence?
Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here so we can you repeat that question?
Can a food truck operate in a neighborhood in front of a residence?
If it's in the public right-of-way, it can with a right-of-way use permit. If it's at a residence on a property that is zoned single family, it would be in that 1 day category. So up to 1 day per month, it could pull into somebody's driveway and operate for 1 day a month. And this was a discussion that was had during the process of developing this proposed code. We kind of half-jokingly called it the birthday party scenario. Somebody want to have a birthday party, have a food truck over one day per month in a single-family property.
But if someone didn't order the food truck to be there to be at their birthday party, they could still park in a neighborhood and operate one day a month? Any neighborhood in this city?
If the neighborhood, if it's on the private property, if it's a single-family zone neighborhood with a single-family use, yes, as long as they have the property owner's permission, they could operate for one day per month
On private property?
on a private property.
But they couldn't park in the street and operate?
If they had a right-of-way permit, and that would be reviewed by the Public Works Department through the existing right-of-way permit processes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Dovey.
Yes. Could you go back to the part where it talks about they can go from 1 to 180 days?
Yeah, let me share the screen.
Yeah, could you explain that a little bit more? It's, I mean, everybody likes food trucks, but it seems to me that we're giving them super advantages over our established restaurants and businesses that have to invest and are fixed. And so can you explain why we would give somebody up to 180 days? I don't get that.
So the
Or maybe
180.
Maybe I don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, the 180 days, this was run through different departments. It was developed fairly collaboratively among all of our planners. We found that the 180 days is an appropriate threshold for treating a mobile vendor like another temporary use. It's not permanent, so they'll have to, if they go over that, then they'll be subject to at least a mobile vendor permit. But that was consistent with, I believe, other day thresholds that you find in other areas of our code, such as our Title 12 business registration requirements. So it basically half a year seemed like an appropriate threshold to
Okay.
apply to
So-
food trucks.
Let me make sure I understand this. So somebody just gets a business license, which is how much? Couple $100? They go through a review checklist that's got 10 or 12 or whatever that list is, and then I can move my truck into Federal Way, park it for 180 days, and we don't care?
That's correct. I mean, we care. So when they fill out that
I know we care, but that's not the type of business I think we're trying to, that I would want in Federal Way. I think that's way too long.
And I think there are likely a lot of food trucks that already operate that way. When they're coming in, there are some that call ahead of time and inquire about that 4-hour threshold, but I think a lot are just getting their business license and going and operating for any duration that they want. It's a real code enforcement challenge. The more you lower that day threshold, it becomes more of a code enforcement challenge as well. So that provides.
I think that one thing that's important to keep in mind is that with L&I, I'm fairly, because of my business and looking into it myself, I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with this. Getting approval through L&I for a food truck or food trailer is an extremely extensive process. And so there's, and also with the county health permits and everything, I mean, it's definitely not a something where there's just somebody hurriedly putting together a food truck and coming in to do something. I mean, it's a very extensive process with the other in the other areas. But anyway, so.
Well, and I understand that, Jack, but my question is, many businesses that are restaurants invest substantial dollars in our city, and they're here more than 180 days, and they've invested in the community. And maybe it's not a big deal, but somebody goes through the financial, it's of a food truck, and they park in front of the mall, and they're taking away from Mama's Sortinis, and they're taking away from Applebee's because they happen to be there for 180 days. I mean, it seems like it's a cowboy random business that somebody decides where they want to park and take customers away from somebody else that has an unfair competitive advantage. I mean, we all like food trucks. We all go to them at events, but it's almost like making a permanent restaurant location for 6 months. That's a little less of a climb than it is for the other businesses that are brick and mortar. I mean, that's just my thought on it. And the other question is on the taxes. How do you collect the taxes? They're mobile. Do they come to Federal Way, or are they going to go where the food truck actually is? You know, they're out of Seattle and they decide it's a great place to be at Celebration Park. How do you collect the sales tax on the food?
So food trucks are supposed to report the vendor code associated, or the sales tax code associated with Federal Way based on where they're selling the goods. So that's legally they have to report that at the point of sale. I also wanted to add up to your previous comment about the concern that you raised, which is raised by a lot of people about the competition with brick and mortar. We consulted a lot. We looked at other cities. We also looked at a chamber study, a Federal Way chamber study that was done, where they did their own review of what other cities are doing as far as food truck regulations. And a lot of research has evolved as food trucks have become more established in different areas that has really contested that idea that they create an unreasonable amount of competition for brick and mortar. Often they're becoming a brick and mortar restaurant themselves, so it accommodates more of a startup business that often will then become a brick and mortar in a place that it operates most frequently. So I can point to a couple firsthand examples of that I've seen in other cities. I can share that that chamber study if you'd like me to.
Sure. Okay.
All right. Councilmember Sefa Dawson.
Thank you so much, Chair. I do support the idea just because it does then help businesses that are owned by minority communities. And so I think, and sometimes that's how you get started to see if it even becomes popular or what the business market is going to be like before you start a brick and mortar type of a place. So I do support the idea, but I also understand Councilmember Dovey's concern. My question is, one is how are the small coffee stands in different parking lots? How are those treated, or where do they even matter? Because that has come up at some point as a discussion. And then my other question also is, can events, can they apply for a blanket permit when they have events such as the farmers market or the Federal Way, what is it, Bite of Federal Way, Taste of Federal Way? Those kinds of events, one day type of events, can they apply for a blanket permit for all their vendors?
I don't know the answer to the question about a blanket permit. They would at least need a temporary business registration to operate even at a special event in the city. I would have to look into our special event code to see if what. Jason could answer that. Oh, is Jason Gerwin in the room? I don't know if Jason, you could answer that question.
Yeah. So what I can tell you about special events, food trucks are tied to the organizer of the event. So if it's city-sponsored event, the city staff would work to organize those food vendors. For the Taste of Federal Way, same thing. So it's based on the person that is running the event. It's their responsibility to organize and coordinate the food trucks. So one blanket would not necessarily cover that. I mean, it would from the city business license standpoint, but not from, different organizers. It's like different promoters of different concerts or something like that. You have to go to that particular organizer.
And Councilmember Sefa Dawson, to your other question about coffee stands, it really depends on whether they fall under the definition, the proposed new definition of mobile food or retail vendors. And the key word is on wheels. So it's an unaffixed food or retail establishment on wheels primarily selling goods, food, or beverages, which is readily movable either through self-propulsion or via towing by vehicle. And the definition goes on from there. So it would be looking closely at the way that coffee vendor is operating and whether it is readily movable or whether it's essentially, even if it's a temporary use, whether it is fixed on the ground. And if it is not a mobile food or retail vendor, but it's temporary, it would still be subject to our temporary use code and may require a temporary use permit.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Councilmember Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. I just want to say that I do share the concern that raised by Chair Dovey. But I was just wondering, was there any study done to see how big is the impact of food trucks to the local, restaurants, things like that you're aware of?
I don't think, I'll double check that chamber study. I don't think it was that specific to the impacts locally here in Federal Way. It was looking more regionally. So I don't know that there's been that fine-grained of a study on food truck impacts in Federal Way and how they may or may not affect brick and mortar.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. Can you go back to this slide with the 3 different uses? So for the 1 day or temporary, are each of these, is it a different cost to operate?
So for the 1 day or temporary, those would be the cost of the business license.
Okay,
So they'd both be subject to just the business license, same cost. Are you asking also about the other ones?
right.
So the mobile vendor permit, that is a cost to be determined that would have to be established through an update to our fee schedule. And then the use process 1, we have an established cost for that. I believe it's less than $1,000, but it's somewhere in the range of $500 to $1,000 for a use process 1. But those latter 2 would come up fairly infrequently, particularly establishing a permanent principal use food truck on a property. But if it does, it's a UP1.
So for the 1 day or temporary up to 180 days, is the business charged for each of if they were to stay in one place for 180 days, are they charged for each day?
No, the cost to them is the cost of the business license. There are different types of business licenses that businesses can apply for. So and this is at the state level through the Department of Revenue, if their type of license requires renewal, they'll have to pay the renewal fee, but it's as long as that's an active business license, they've paid their fee up front so they can once they have that approval from the city, and we've reviewed their checklist and basic information at the front end, they can bounce around to different sites. And now, if they're in violation of our new food truck requirements, and there's a code enforcement complaint or something, that would be treated as a code enforcement action after the fact.
So let's say they're here for 184 days. Are they fined for those 4 days that they're not supposed to be here?
This gets into code enforcement, kind of their practices. I don't know if I suspect we have a voluntary kind of notice of infraction that happens first. I don't want to speak to our code enforcement practices, but if a food truck is operating over that 180 limit and the city finds out, or through its own investigation, or somebody calls the city and complains, that would be dealt with through our regular code enforcement actions, I believe.
Just to add on to that, so they wouldn't automatically be fined on day 181. It would have to be triggered by the city investigating either through a complaint by a neighbor or the city otherwise independently discovering that they were operating over the 180-day threshold. At that point, the city would either issue a stop work order or some other code enforcement thing and go from there. But no, it's not as if they get fined automatically for every day after 180.
Okay, and one last question. Who's keeping track of the days?
So once a food truck comes in, I don't think we're going to be checking in on every food truck that's permitted. If they are over that 180 days, then it could be treated as a code enforcement action. But it's really no different. Right now, we have food trucks that are operating well over that 4-hour limit all over the city. And so I don't think we have the human power to go after every single one as a code enforcement action. So it's no different than the code infractions that currently exist with food trucks all around the city.
And just to add, just a little bit to that, current temporary uses also have a duration limit in terms of number of days. It's the same thing as that. We don't actively track to make sure they stop operation on the last day of that period. It's complaint-based or city discovery that they're beyond that period. So it would be very similar to how we currently treat temporary uses.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Council President Kochmar.
So I have questions about the 180 days as well. So I know that we've had some food trucks have come and gone. Does that 180-day permit means only up to 180 days of service or 180 days from start to finish?
From start to finish at a site. So if they can be at a site for up to 180 days with just the business license.
So they could come and go within that 180 days? In other words, they could be here one day, gone, and then day 3, day 4, they're back, and then gone again. But the permit goes up to 180 days.
Yes, that's correct. It's up to 180 days at any one particular site within any one particular calendar year.
So it's per site?
Per site, that's correct. So just to give an example of that, a food truck could operate at site A for 90 days, then go to site B and operate at site B for 90 days, then come back to site A and operate for another 90 days, and then go back to site B and operate for another 90 days. That would be 180 days total at each site during the year. So yes, the 180 days is site-specific.
So they're not getting a permit for each site, just one permit for both sites?
They're just getting their business license to operate within the city, and yes, you're correct. It's not a site-specific permit. That's correct.
So it sounds like that you've researched whatever other municipalities have done, and this is fairly consistent with what others have done?
Big picture, I think this is actually more, it provides more flexibility. I mean, I haven't looked at every city, but overall it provides more flexibility for mobile vendors than many cities in the area. Puyallup being a benchmark, they have a food truck pilot program, Burien, where there's more of a process up front that some of them have to go through, whereas there's others they haven't established a food truck code at all. So it's less lenient in some cities, more lenient than others. But those who've looked into the issue, some are still undergoing these pilot programs where this is more flexible. I mean, I'm just thinking of Burien and Puyallup specifically. This is a bit more flexible of a food truck code than those cities. But I can give you more specifics if you'd like on other benchmark cities that are more comparison in population to Federal Way.
And I should, again, sorry to keep on adding just a little bit to the end of each one of Evan's sentences, but we might be slightly, at least as proposed, more permissive in terms of the flexibility, but there are a lot of other cities that are more flexible in terms of how food trucks are able to use the right-of-way, for instance. And remember, this doesn't change our current regulation of food trucks that are in the right-of-way. A lot of other cities are more open, more allowing of food trucks in the right-of-way than we are, and that we're proposed to be even after this code amendment.
Right. If I can, I'll make just a few comments on this. As someone who, with my own business, is a food establishment, a brick and mortar food establishment, and also I've looked into food trucks, food trailers, mobile food businesses, and I think that this is reasonable. I'm not concerned that it would be taking business away from established brick and mortar businesses. I think it'd be a benefit to the city and a benefit to the residents, and also, I mean, hey, that 3.5% sales tax on every item. I mean, that definitely helps the bottom line in the city as well. And so I think that it has some definite benefits. I don't think that the 180-day thing is a major concern as far as unfair competition with brick and mortar businesses. And I feel that I have some pretty good insights into that. So personally, I would urge that the passage of this. I think it's a good idea. There's lots of hoops for a food truck, many hoops that they need to jump through with L&I, and especially with L&I and with the health department as well. So I think that they've done a good job on this.
Hey,
And-
Jack,
Yes, Jack.
can I ask a couple more questions here? Sorry, I don't know if you saw my hand raised.
Yeah, okay, now I'm seeing your hand, okay.
Okay, so I have two suggestions that we might want to consider. One, 180 days to me is too long, and the way that the enforcement just got explained to me is too loose. I'm all for food trucks, but maybe we say you get 90 days and you can renew it, and we require every food truck to have GPS on it that we can monitor, so we know that they're actually complying to what our rule is. So we're not waiting on citizens to call and complain, or a code enforcement person to drive by and see a food truck that's been there too long. And those two things gives us a little bit more control. So if somebody's really doing well, they're going to say, I want to do well so I can stay, and we grant them the license if they continue to do good business in our city. But then we also have them monitor how long they stay somewhere by putting, $360 worth of GPS on their truck, and it gives the city, the enforcement, the ability to verify where they're at, and then we have control, and we also have a way to check on everything, and then it maybe makes a lot more sense to me.
Any other comments? So,
Well, I'm wondering if, Councilmember Dovey, did you want to make a amendment to the recommendation?
Well, this is the first time we've heard it. I don't know if this is an urgent decision that we need to make, or is it one that we can take all the different things we've talked about and massage it and make it a little different in February? Or, I may be bringing something up that the staff says, oh, we can't monitor it or doesn't make sense, but I'm just trying, to me, 180 days and we're waiting for someone to self-inspect themselves is an opportunity for failure.
Councilmember Tran.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Chair Dovey. If we don't have to do this right away, we can table this for further research. My concern with the GPS system is that it might sound good, but then it create more work for our staff. So the bottom line is, if this is not the urgent matter that we have to do today, I would rather send back to staff with additional questions from council, and then let them do a little bit more research, and then we can take action at a later date. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm fine with it going back to staff. Personally, I don't see the need of a GPS unit on it. If there is a complaint, whether it's from a brick and mortar business or from just a resident, then they'll let us know. If there isn't a complaint, what has it really mattered anyway? I mean, we're still getting the benefit, the tax benefit. We're still providing something for the public, for the residents. And so if there's a complaint, we'll hear about it. If there's not a complaint, it probably really didn't matter anyway. So those are my feelings. But I think that right now we have a decision of whether we send this on to the full council or whether we send it back to staff for review and consideration of some of the things that we've discussed.
I'd like to send it back to staff if it's not urgent, like it's going to make a difference in the next 30 days.
All right. Is there a second to send it back to staff?
I would second that.
I have a question.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, so discussion. Yes, Lydia.
Yeah, help me understand why we're sending it back to staff again?
Do you want to comment on that, Jack?
Yeah, I personally believe that I don't have a problem with the two definitions where we're defining it and what a food truck is and how it works. But the third one, we're talking about the timing. 180 days doesn't pass my, what I think is reasonable. And then it's like what we just heard, they could go 180 days on 1st and 21st, and then they can go there 90, and then they go somewhere else for 90, and then they come back for 90, and they go back for 90. So we're granting them a whole year. And I'm not sure that passes my smell test.
So what would be your recommendation then?
I would look at it, if someone wants to bring a food truck in, which I would encourage, you give them a business license. It's a temporary license, so you can make sure they're good corporate citizens in our city. They're doing a good job. They're not causing issues. And then once they prove themselves, then you could go into something even more permanent than that, than a random, hey, you get 180 days and they got to keep moving around because they want to stay in Federal Way. I do think we have to change the 4 hours to 8 hours. No food truck can make any money coming here and have them be shooed off in 4 hours. I think that's a good idea to change that. But I just think out of the chute, a business license, and here's 180 days. And really, I just heard that here's business license, it's a whole year, you can do what you want, is not a good way to govern it. I just have some issues thinking about that.
Okay, well, thank you. I just wanted to hear what the proposal was, so thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Any other, Jack, I still see your hand up, is it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Okay.
sorry. It's my
And-
computer challenged.
All right. All right, well, before us, we have a motion and a second to send it back to staff. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor of sending it back to staff, say aye.
Aye.
On this, I'm actually going to abstain, so we have 2 in favor of sending it back to staff, and I'm abstaining, so thank you. All right, that takes us to, get my iPad back here again. Let's see. All right, item D, ordinance 2022 various code amendments. Yes, Staff Member Kamenecki.
Okay. Good evening, council members. For the record, my name is Natalie Kamenicki, Associate Planner with Community Development, and I'm here to talk to you about the various code amendments that we considered over 2022. The city issued notice and a State Environmental Policy Act decision on September 16th of 2022 for the 9 items we will go over tonight. Just briefly, they include boundary line adjustment submittal procedures, hearing notices, affordable housing definitions, community design guidelines, residential setbacks, off-street parking minimums, corrections to wetland buffer widths, and obviously the food trucks was another portion of this SEPA determination. The SEPA notice and comment period was issued, and there were no appeals filed. Regarding the 9 items tonight that I will be presenting, there was some public comment received in opposition of the proposed amendment to allow small mechanical units within the single-family zone side and rear yard setback. and that public comment is included in the staff memo for you. No other public comments were received on the 9 items that I am going over with you tonight. So item 1 is regarding boundary line adjustment application submittal requirements. The proposed code change aims to create greater consistency with Title 18 subdivisions for minimum application information to be submitted. And this is in an effort to be consistent with the other applications that come in under Title 18 subdivisions. So currently, if you submit a short plat or a preliminary plat, we have a checklist that is handed out, and now the boundary line adjustment will have that same procedure to be consistent. Item 2 is regarding hearing notice requirements, and this is an effort to establish a distinction between a public hearing and an appeal hearing, and just to clean up the code, as there's already established appeal hearing standards within the code. So that is just further clarification on who should receive these notices, and just make that distinction since we already have appeal hearing and public hearing standards in our code. Item number 3 is process 6 council rezone criteria. This clarifies the decisional criteria that is consistent with the way the city has processed those applications over the last many, many years. And that would make it consistent with administrative procedures. So that really just identifies what criteria we're looking at when reviewing those types of applications. Item number 4 is regarding the affordable housing definition. This would update the data source from the median county income to area median income. And the AMI data is updated more frequently and provides a more accurate assessment for affordable housing determinations. And we would also strike an inapplicable code section, which is noted in the packet. Currently, when the city uses these definitions, we have to use or transpose the median county income to area median income for our applications. And we can go into that a little bit more if there's questions. Regarding community design guidelines, we would be removing an outdated site element, phone booth, and we would also correct a district guideline section where the code points you in the direction, if you are building something that is non-residential in a residential zone, it would steer you towards residential uses. So we need to have, when you apply for a non-residential use in a residential zone, you're directed to the non-residential design guidelines for buildings and site development. Structures and improvements. This is the code amendment which would allow a small mechanical unit or air conditioning within the side yard setback and rear yard setback within the single-family zone. Item number 7 is regarding off-street parking minimums, and this is a required update to be consistent with state law. And there's different parameters and uses and transit frequency that would that the development would need to meet in order to use these new standards. Item number 8 is a correction to the distance in which critical area wetlands are regulated. Currently, our code reads it at 225 feet, which 300 feet is actually consistent with the maximum buffer widths that can be potentially regulated. And item number 9 is a correction to the multifamily zone chart heading, and is a correction only and not a change to any other regulation. The Planning Commission held their public hearing on November 2nd, 2022. And after discussion and deliberation, they did recommend approval of all the code amendments, including the food trucks, and the vote was unanimous, and the hearing was closed at that time. Decision criteria for amendments are listed in Federal Way Revised Code 1980-130, actually, that's a typo. And it is summarized in item number 5 in the staff memo, with citing the community or the comprehensive plan, land use goals and policies, which aims to streamline permitting and create more consistency throughout the code. That. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
that will conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Dovey?
Yeah, I have a few. Thank you for your presentation. Could you go into a little bit more depth on item 4, the affordable housing question, so I understand what you actually said? How is it done? How do we come up with affordable housing now, and how will it change?
It's my understanding that the area, we currently use the area county medium, but when we apply for different programs, we have to transpose that definition into something different. And I think Cheney Skatston, our senior planner, can help us.
Maybe I can make my question a little more specific. So if you take King County, I think that's what we do, man, I could be wrong. The affordability index will be higher than if you take just South King County, is that correct? And are we then therefore making it lower thresholds to build in King County? Or what is that? Okay, Cheney, you can explain it, please.
Hi, good evening, Chair Dovey. I'm Cheney Skatson. So no, this is really merely changing the language in our code to just be more consistent with the industry standards. What the current definition says is pointing at the same data source as the new definition. So it's the area median income. It will remain the area median income, which is for the Seattle Bellevue metro area. When we were preparing the Housing Action Plan a couple years ago, we tried to look into what establishing a area median income would be, but because of data sources and issues, it wasn't reliable. So we used the metro, Bellevue, Seattle metro, HUD-defined area median income.
So we would be using exactly the same criteria as Bellevue, Seattle, Kent, Auburn. Everybody would be using the same criteria.
Yeah, it's really merely the words used to describe the data source. It just is taking out some ambiguity.
Okay.
This code amendment.
Thank you. Okay, so this is just the word changes and doesn't change any valuations or any quality of what affordable housing actually is.
No, it should be the same source, the same number. It just is more consistent with the industry standards.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
All right. Yeah, so Cheney, so the Seattle Bellevue metropolitan area is basically the same as King County then?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
So, Jack, I have one more question,
Yes.
if I could.
Yes.
On this water setback, the setback on building 220 feet versus 300, I know over the years that's changed. So does that mean if someone had high bank waterfront, they'd have to be 300 feet from the high bank now, and currently it's 225, or what does that chain actually do? Or if they were to build a house on Mirror Lake, if they tore it down, would they have to move it back, or how does that actually work?
Yes, excellent question, and it does not increase those types of setbacks. If you were to look at our critical areas map and say you want to develop a piece of property and it's within 300 feet of our mapped wetlands, you would need to address that in the development review process through critical area review, which we do on a very consistent basis. This is just not consistent with the most current buffer widths required by or prescribed by ecology, really.
So ecology now is 300 feet?
It's been that way for a while. I feel this may have been an oversight in the last critical areas update.
Okay, so if we were to do something at the old Blueberry Farm, where we were to rehabilitate that building, which is less than 300 feet from the critical wetland, would we still be able to do that, or do we have to move it back 300 feet?
I'm not entirely familiar with every building
I'm
on
just
that
using that
site,
as an
but-
example. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know how many places we have that are buildable next to a ecologically wetland that this could affect, but I'm just curious.
The 300-foot buffer would only be affixed to a Category 1 wetland. which is a rare occurrence. The city sees more 3, 4, some 2s mixed in there. But there's other procedures when you develop, as far as you can do buffer averaging or a 25-foot buffer reduction. Depending on when the site was developed, there could be permanently altered buffer that can be identified through your biologist and continue to use those approved footprints if you were to rebuild in that same footprint.
Okay, so, but right now the state rule or ecology rule is 300 and ours happens to say 225, so we're just trying to become consistent.
Well, that's sort of, there's a portion of our code where that's, if you are at least within that distance, you have to provide a study. This city does have the ability to ask for a critical areas report on really any development, but this would ensure that we're not missing any unknown category 1s that could be located within the city.
Okay, can I ask another question? Just, let's say there was a lake or a pond somewhere and it's built all around now and somebody comes in and redevelops it and the current use is all around this pond. If they were to redevelop, would they have to go back 300 feet from the pond? That's pretty critical wetland, right? Potentially?
So, sorry, Natalie, if I might just jump in here. There's a couple things, Jack. I think just to summarize what Natalie said before in less technical wording, the 300-foot buffer is not you cannot do anything within that 300-foot buffer. It's just the area that triggers the requirement to do a wetland study in order to determine impacts to the wetland. And there's also many different mechanisms for varying or otherwise changing or allowing certain development within that 300-foot buffer in various different ways, including redevelopment or repair of existing structures. And I think now to get into the more technical terms, there's ways you can modify what the buffer looks like, buffer averaging and other mechanisms that make it so that it's not a flat ban on just doing anything within that area, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. You've answered my question. Thank you much.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. In that case, I'm trying to see what the motions are here.
Wouldn't we move this forward, but take out the food truck, because that's going to come back from staff? So we'd move, 8 of them forward to the consent agenda?
I believe the food truck one is actually a separate agenda item, which we've already voted on. So if you move to vote this one forward, it won't affect the food trucks. The food trucks will still be going back to staff.
Okay, thank you. I would move that we approve this and move it to the consent agenda if that's where we need to send it.
Is there a second?
Sorry, if I might butt in, the motion should be to forward this to first reading on January 17th, which I think was Jack's intent.
I'll let you, Councilman Tran, I'll let you be the guy.
Okay, I'll restate it, the motion. I move to forward the proposed ordinance to the first reading on January 17, 2023.
All right.
Second.
Jack, are you seconding that then?
I am seconding that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 It is unanimous. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. All right, and the next item, item E, park impact fees. Jason Gerwin.
Good evening, council members. Thank you. I've got an informational piece for you, and unfortunately, it might be the least informational piece you guys will ever receive. We entered into a contract with the FCS group back in October to study park impact fees, do policy analysis and technical analysis, and make recommendations or give us some options for recommendation in imposing park impact fees in the city of Federal Way. We are off schedule significantly, and a big portion of that is due to the slide project at the community center demanding so much of our attention. And so the city did not get the deliverables that the FCS group needed to study, massage, and kind of do that technical analysis on. And so with that timeline being backed up, we are currently on track to have our kind of first review of the preliminary data on January 17th. That's a group of staff from multiple departments and reviewing that information. With that being said, because I knew I needed to make the report, I did try to give you guys some background information, included the RCW's background information on park impact fees, as well as the scope that we signed in the contract with the FCS group. And with that being said, I would entertain any questions if you had. Like I say, I don't have a lot of information to report at this time. Looking to come back at a future meeting, most likely February 6th LUTC meeting, to be able to share some more pertinent information with you on the proposed implementation of park impact fees.
All right, Chair Dovey.
Yes, I just was going to ask, can we get the information on our next meeting so we can make some decisions? Or just
Yeah, and so like I say, we're scheduled to meet with the FCS group on January 17th. It should kind of be a first run. I've let them know the eagerness and kind of the urgency that we kind of want to be working on this. And so just depending on kind of what staff sees, you will definitely get a report at the next LUTC meeting. How far and quickly we can progress in that, we might be able to be pretty far. But again, until we have that meeting with them and review kind of the work they've done, I can't give that indication, but at a minimum, you would receive another informational update on the 2/6 LUTC meeting.
okay, I'm okay with that.
All right, thank you, thank you.
Thank you all.
Unfortunately, we
Appreciate
don't
your
have it on the good
understanding.
side, it shortens this meeting. So, all right. And
you
so
all.
we will go on to item F, Sound Transit Update.
Good evening. That's not what I wanted. All right. So I am Ken Smith with the Public Works Department, presenting for Sound Transit updates for January. So there's not a lot to update since they kind of had a break over the holiday season. For north of 317th, so north of the city center, they're continuing their landscaping, noise wall construction, system duct bank, MSC walls, basically along the corridor. And still working on the deck work for their crossings across South 288th Street, Military Road at Star Lake, and Military Road at 304th Street. And they're doing some grading and prep work for their traction power substations. Within the city center, they've resumed following the moratorium in the city core. Station work, they're doing a little bit of fire line and utility work. On the garage, kind of a similar fire line, and then deck and column pours to support the construction of the new garage portion. They are working to get utility crossings along 23rd Avenue South and South 317th, expected pretty soon, but probably within the next few weeks. Their phase closure of 23rd and South 317th is expected in February, with the construction of the new roundabout and concrete roadway kind of corresponding with that start. And the construction of the end-of-line facilities ongoing, similar utility work and foundation work. And not much updates for O&M facility. The FEIS is expected in May of 2023. Similar for TDLA. We're still waiting to hear back from Sound Transit on when they would like to do some public engagement. One last thing for the Transit Center station. They gave us a brief update on the proposed artwork for the station at the Arts Commission that was last week. I don't have a lot of info yet, but I'm hoping to share more at the next meeting. So, and that's it. I'll answer any questions.
All right, we don't have a proposed design for the artwork or anything yet?
They have an image, but I didn't get a chance to grab it. I only knew that they were going to share it about a few days before. So I'll work to have it on the next meeting.
Okay, all right.
So I know that Deputy Mayor Honda was at the Arts Commission meeting, but so was our Arts Commission Chair. I wonder if she'd like to come to the podium and tell us about the artwork. I'm sure that Susan will as well.
Hello, I'm Vicki Chenoweth, the chair of the Arts Commission. I wasn't planning on speaking this evening. You know, I believe that Sound Transit has picked an artist that has not actually, doesn't actually get who we are at Federal Way. He has a Tiffany lamp. That is his new proposal. His first proposal was a log with no branches on it, with an elephant and a crane at the top. And now it's a Tiffany lamp. So green. It's green. But, you know, we as a community are working to bring in businesses. We're trying to get away from this bedroom community stigmatism. It's not really a stigmatism. I don't know the proper word, but we're trying to bring in businesses and create a different downtown core area, a vibrant community. And I don't know where the Tiffany lamp fits in with our community. It would be great if it was, you know, in the next to a, I don't know what it would be great at really, but anyway, you know, he mentioned Chihuly. You know, that was his inspiration, is for, because Chihuly is from here. Well, Chihuly is very organic in his artwork. He doesn't have anything that looks like a Tiffany lamp in any of his work installations. And so, anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you, Vicki. All right, Jack, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question. Our senator we read about secured many hundreds of millions of dollars for Sound Transit to go to the Tacoma area. Has there been any discussion on how that's going to affect the timelines, or speed it up, or are we really fully funded like the newspaper says, or is there more to the story?
I haven't heard anything as far as affecting the timelines.
Not going to speed it up or anything?
Nothing that I know of. Yeah. They've been a little bit reluctant to release a full timeline. Right now, I think they're still waiting on some of the design decisions to actually put together that, but hopefully within the next 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
I have a question.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. Has Sound Transit talked about when they're going to be having the public meeting that they talked about having last summer? I knew I was going to ask that.
Yeah, they're still waiting to hear back from the tribes. It's been the same answer, and I pressed them on it, and it's still there.
I don't understand what the issue is. They know what they knew that they needed to talk to the public. The public's getting information here and there and has questions about what's going on. And the sooner we can let the public know what's going on, the better, so that the correct information gets out and not wrong information. So I don't understand what the issue is. And I know it's not your fault. It's just frustrating.
Yeah, no, I got that.
And I would just like to say, I disagree with the arts chair. I like the lamp. I like the lamp because I like the fact that it's glass, although I'm concerned about vandalism of that. But it's different, and it's, you know, there'll be a bench around the base of it. I would like to see the bench made a little bit bigger than what he proposed. And, you know, if he has $300,000, and whatever he makes has to fit into the base that has already been put into the ground, so it has to fit that. And so he's got some restrictions on what he can put there based on that. And that's an engineering thing, not an art thing. So I kind of like it. I like it much better than the elephant on the dead tree. And I think it would be really cute downtown. But, you know, art is different for everyone, and everyone has a different opinion about it. So we'll see. It was just a concept. It wasn't a finished drawing. It wasn't, it was a concept that he offered. And so it wasn't finished, and who knows what the finished project will look like. But I do hope he presents something something more definite as he gets closer to the deadline, whatever his deadline is. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
With Sound Transit, is there such a thing as deadlines?
Oh.
Maybe we can have an iconic sign put there.
Which would say what, Sound Transit?
So, all right. Councilmember Assefa-Dawson.
Thank you, Chair. And I also wanted to add to what Deputy Mayor Honda said. I also like the lamp. It might be a little too small. And I think if it's, but the concept, the idea, and the fact that it's going to be lit up at night also made it very attractive to me. But just like Deputy Mayor said, the bench seems too small. I believe they said 5 feet, and it's like, how many people can sit if you're going to use it as a bench? But having some kind of a marker, an indentation or something would even be better than just a flat base if the plan is to be used as a sitting area for people who want to sit there. But otherwise, the lamp, yeah, I did like it as well. So thank you.
All right. Yeah, if we could, the rest of us could see something, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm going to reach out and hopefully see if they can come to the next meeting, maybe offer the same presentation.
All right. Thank you. Any further questions? Oh, thank you, Kent.
Thanks.
And we try not to shoot the messenger.
No problem.
All right. Item number G, quarterly updates for the comp plan. Cheney.
Hi, good evening. I'm Cheney Scotson. Good evening, Chair Dovey, Councilmember Tran, Councilmember Walsh, Council President Kochmar, and Deputy Mayor Honda. Forgot to share my screen. It's okay, sorry. Okay, take two. I'm here this evening to provide the quarterly update. Last month got a little busy with the agenda, so it's postponed a month, but this is our fourth quarterly update, I think. Yes, because we started in March. So we've been working on this comp plan update for almost a year now, or I guess over a year, and I'm just going to provide some updates. So this is some community outreach events and groups we've spoke with to date, either events we've attended or outreach we've done. But our outreach approach is evolving. At our last ad hoc committee for the Update 2024, we asked our ad hoc members, who's missing from this list? Who might be underrepresented, and so we hope to continue our community outreach efforts that continues to dive deeper into different areas of the city and different groups and communities and segments that we might not have reached. This includes, like, specifically, we're on a run right now to talk to a lot of property owners. So in terms of area-specific conversations in terms of sub-area planning. So in South Station, we're having a lot of conversations with property owners down there. The City Planning Division and the Chamber are partnering to provide or work on downtown focus groups with downtown property owners and other chamber members to talk about our plans for downtown. So those are just a few areas we're working on, and of course, if you have any suggestions or want to help steer this evolving outreach approach, we'd be happy to hear about any organizations or who we should be connected with. And this is just pictures from last summer. So here is a table of our progress so far. Notably, the Arts, Culture, Historic Preservation chapter went to Planning Commission and briefed Planning Commission in November. And I guess I'll mention that all the items in the column Planning Commission briefed, those are still in draft form, but it just, we're taking this approach that the Planning Commission is briefed on each chapter, each policy and goal is read aloud and discussed. And we'll end up going back again and refining before we go for adoption. And then also something that these Planning Commission briefed chapters are missing is the implementation. So over the next 2 years, we will be continuing to build these chapters with the next steps on how to realize the goals and policies. Yes. I will now dive into the chapters, a little more details to the chapters that we're working on. So I believe I spoke to or about the arts chapter last time, but like I mentioned, this was presented in Planning Commission in November. And the purpose of this chapter is to identify areas for attention, programming, possible investment, to learn from and enhance the way that people experience their time in Federal Way. So this chapter provides a framework for identifying opportunities that planning for the arts, culture, and historic preservation have in building the community identity and character. And allows us to bridge the past, present, and the future for people to enjoy. So it really gets around the experience people have in Federal Way and using arts, culture, and our own history and legacy to do so. The Parks and Recreational chapter. So this is a new chapter to the comprehensive plan. It didn't exist before this time, but the Parks and Recs Department is actually moving up their updating their PROS plan to be more coordinated and on cycle with the periodic update to the comprehensive plan, so that just getting all of our planning documents in order and on appropriate or more easily to follow timelines. But this new chapter of the comp plan will be consistent with the PROS plan and then also consistent with the GMA. And currently, the Parks Department and Planning Division are, I think, working together to define the scope for bringing on a consultant on board for updating the PROS plan, and that is AHBL. And the transportation chapter has been going through a lot of technical work in preparation for updating this chapter, creating a base year of data. So the transportation chapter has a technical portion and then also, just like the other chapters, goals and policies. And currently they've been working on creating using base year data to identify where all the jobs and housing units within the city are, so that they can estimate future year trips and adjust or ensure the model functions appropriately. And those future years are 2029 and 2044. Feel free to add anything if you want, EJ. An essential piece of this transportation update is that when we're looking at making sure our model works for our transportation network functions for 2044, it's using our planning targets of the housing and jobs that were ratified, which were approximately 11,000 housing units and 19,000 jobs by 2044. Another new chapter to the comprehensive plan is climate and resiliency. So with this new chapter comes a lot of new information the city needs to be able to write the goals and policies. So the city is using what I believe funds from a Department of Commerce grant and is under contract with Cascadia Consulting Group to identify Federal Way's leading greenhouse gas emissions data and collection following the U.S. Communities Protocol, which helps identify the sources and inventory the greenhouse gas emissions, and then helps forecast the 2044 greenhouse emissions with and without mitigation measures. This consultant group will help identify the data and then or inventory the data and provide the analysis. But that's really just getting started. And our next big community outreach event will be at the community center on March 9th, but we'll also feature an online opportunity on February 28th. And this is to just provide updates on the chapters that have gone through Planning Commission and then seek input and, answer questions about the chapters that are in progress and yet to be written. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Cheney.
Yeah.
Questions, first from the committee. Can I see the screen for see if we have. Okay. Chair Dovey, let's start with you.
Cheney, did I hear it correctly? 2024, 19,510 jobs, or maybe I misheard what you said. Is that planning for them or what?
Okay. So our planning horizon is 2044, and I said approximately.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
I was going to say, where's that magic wand? That's great. 2024? I'm sorry,
Did
I
I
heard
really say
2024.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. And what type of jobs are you planning for?
It's a good question. So the way you plan for jobs depends on the NAICS code, which is I'm not even going to try to guess what those letters stand for. It's like the industry. And so you are calculating like the employment space utilization rate. So like an office job needing 300 square feet per person versus a manufacturing job that might require 1,200 square feet. So the jobs are really just used to help define how much space they're going to need and if we have adequate space for those types of jobs. So a lot of the jobs in like the mixed use areas are using a 300 square foot space utilization rate, which would be closer to office, retail, commercial, restaurant types.
So with the fact that Sound Transit is using all that property over, potentially using all that property over by Christian Faith Center, where we could have had all sorts of jobs in 2044, it's kind of sad because we could have even more jobs and more businesses over there. But anyway, my question is on the arts and heritage, that section. Under the heritage part of it, are you covering the history of the city and the older buildings that we have here and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so yes. The answer to the question is yes, we are. It's hard not to like dive into like creating a biography of Federal Way in this chapter because it doesn't need to be that. It's really what you want to use this chapter for is the goals and policies to preserving those structures or outlining how to at least inventory them and how do we make sure that our history stays alive by honoring local heroes with, naming of buildings or naming of streets or how to create programs. So the chapter does specify specific areas or locations or structures of local importance, such as, Brook Lake Community Center and Camp Kilworth. But it's, and the cabins, but they're, I will make sure it's emphasized that like this isn't an exhaustive list that lives in the comp plan, but it may, by the time we update the comp plan next time, there will be an inventory to reference.
Okay, and so for the art section of that, do you list the public art and when it came in, who the artist was and all of that kind of information?
It references the Parks Department. They, I don't know if it's the Parks and Rec Department has an inventory booklet. So it references that and uses some photos from it, but it isn't like, this chapter would maybe, quadruple in size, having all inventories in the chapter, but since it's all digital, there's actually like a live link to it.
So we actually don't have that much public art that it would take up that much space.
In the chapter now, there's a map of where public art is, and that's based on the inventory that that booklet I'm mentioning that I'm like really missing the name of. It's like that map is in the chapter, but not each art picture and the biography of each piece of public art are in the chapter, no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hey, Jack,
Right,
I have
yes.
2 more questions that
Yes.
popped up in my brain. Hey, Cheney, are you suggesting that we need, for that many jobs at 300 square feet, almost 6 million square feet of office space?
I don't have my
I mean,
calculator.
I just took 300 times 19,560, and it comes out to just short of 6 million square feet of space. Is that how that gets defined?
That's how you would maybe calculate it, but there's like an abundancy of vacant or office space, so I'm not saying this is necessarily new space. It could be.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
I mean, part of this whole exercise is identifying, like, do we have enough land for that? And
That's what I was
ensuring
gonna
that there
say.
is.
I mean,
So,
when we
yes.
look at 11,500 new dwelling units, and then add the number of space to house 19,000 people to work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking, what was that? How many hundred acres is that for the 11,000? Isn't it like 300 acres you have to set aside, something like that?
It's all dependent on your assumptions of density and height.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, maybe like it might require 300 acres if it was all single family, but I don't know. That's just off the top of my head.
Yeah. I know Keith knows that answer. He's told it to me before. The big number. Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other, yes.
I have a quick question. I know that we're getting some warehouses east of the freeway, excuse me, not east of the freeway, but over at Weyerhaeuser. And I know we had a discussion previously about point of sale where the taxes are paid. So if we're getting warehouses, if you buy a refrigerator, for example, in a city and it comes from a warehouse, and that's the point of sale because it's coming from the warehouse, so that tax goes to that city, is that still in existence or not?
I'm not sure.
I think if it's retail.
If it's just being
No,
transferred
well,
from
no,
one truck
it's
to
the,
another, though.
it's actually for the,
Keith Niven, Community Development Director. So if you're purchasing something online, like it could be an appliance online, the point of sale is your house. If you're purchasing it from like Best Buy and Federal Way, but it comes through a warehouse somewhere, that warehouse doesn't generate any revenue. It's just basically it's a stop point along the way to getting to your house.
No, I know that, but it used to be, because we've had this discussion in the past, where if you bought the refrigerator here, and it came from a warehouse in Kent, that they got the point of sale taxes.
They
That law
changed.
got
They
changed.
changed that.
Changed? Oh,
Yeah.
that's what I was
Yeah.
wondering. Yeah.
We had that discussion a long time ago, and they changed that law.
So what good are those warehouses going to do us anyway? That's my question.
19,000 jobs?
yeah.
They're
Jobs,
warehouses.
jobs and property tax.
Warehouses?
The trucks are gonna come.
The trucks are going to come and go, and they're going to, I'm trying to understand how those warehouses are going to be beneficial to our city.
So the warehouses will provide some job growth. But in terms of if the council's thinking about getting to that 20,000 number, warehousing is,
I'm not going to do it.
no.
We need manufacturing.
Now, one of the models, I think, for, or conversations that happen publicly about those warehouses was they might be demised into smaller spaces that then individual contractors could potentially lease. I'm not sure it's going there. I'm not sure it's not going there. So that's a possibility. But if it goes to just one big distribution center that's a stop between the port and some other freight system, probably not a lot of benefit to the city.
Thank you.
Probably just a slightly higher property tax than what it would be otherwise, and that'd be it. So, okay.
With a lot of traffic.
With a lot of traffic, yeah. So, any other questions for Cheney or for Keith, or? All right. Thank you for your presentation. It is appreciated.
Thank you.
And I believe that that is the last item on the agenda. Anything else to be brought before the committee? All right, our next meeting will be February 6th at 5 PM right here. And with that, we are adjourned.
Good night.
Thank you, Jack.
Good night.
And
Thank
NAICS is, by the way, is North
night.
American Identification Code. So anyway.